Come on. Oh, come on, Google Meet. There we go. Huh? That's the problem that we had earlier. Yeah, it's giving me the spinning bubble right now. If you, like I said, I know you guys are used to doing this all digitally, but I did print off extra paper ones because I figured that this was going to happen if you did not get into it. Or I can try to email you the link to it if you want. Yours is working? Okay, let me get into my thing and I will, and this goes for those of you that are remote. If you can't get into Canvas and get the quaternary notes, just unmute yourself and tell me, and I'm about ready to just email them to you because yeah. I don't know what else to do. We're so dependent on technology that copy link done here. At least well, I better not jinx myself. At least right now the internet's working. Does anybody else want me to just send the thing to you that can't get into it? Did you get into it, Kale? Or is it still telling you? Okay, well, let me change this so that you can't edit it. Okay, I just sent it to you, Cameron. If anybody else can't get in for whatever reason, and my Canvas has been unbelievably slow. See, it is at a snail's pace for me. It's not even letting me. Oh my gosh, this is this is gonna be fun. Okay. Braylon and Taylor, do you need me to send the a copy of the notes to you? Just let me know if you can't get in or if anybody else can't get it. You just got the notes. Okay, because yeah, this is gonna be one of those days. All right, I don't know what's going on with Mr. Cobb. Maybe he's not here today. So yesterday, what? They're all one big solid chain. Oh, actually, the Cenozoic ones were sent out. They were sent out Sunday. They were, I have, everybody's on like a mass email that gets it. It was sent out Sunday, Dave. So as long as you can get them before, it should be in there. So check. They should be there. If not, I can resend it to you. All right. For today, we're doing the quaternary. Okay, that's the current period, y'all. And we know that in this period, all the big ice age beasts are running around. We've got early humans, not the primitive ones, not like Lucy and Artie and then all of that, but we've got Neanderthals running around, we got Cro-Magnons running around. But most of the predators at this time, the only exception really is a human, because we're sort of wimpy, were huge, okay? Like the bear, the short-faced bear was bigger than the polar bear. It was ginormous. It stood up over 12 feet tall. Like it was huge. We had saber-toothed cats up in Canada. We had scimitar-toothed cats that were more south of that. Dire wolves, bigger than, not like the size of this room kind of big, but you know, dire wolves stand about yay tall. So compared like to us, we shouldn't have survived, but we did. Why did humans, what is it about us that let us survive?
We were giants.
No, we were not giants. We were, actually, people were a couple inches taller, and we shrunk and grew again. But what is it that's so special about our species that let us survive all of this? It's not just our brains, okay? It's our ability to problem solve, but there's a couple other things that we did. What is it that the Stone Age people? That's it. We could make tools, weapons. We are not going to run up to something and like tear its throat out with these wimpy little claw fingernails that we have. I guess you could try to bite its throat out. That'd be disgusting. Okay, so it's our ability to problem solve. It's the size of our brain to body mass ratio, which is obviously the highest of any of the organisms on this planet. There's a couple that are close to us, but not like us. It's our ability to create weapons and tools, to be able to work together, the way that we communicate. couple other major things that we've done, and I don't want to go too far into this because that's what we should be doing Monday and possibly Tuesday. Oh, somebody wants to come in. Okay, so let me freeze this. Whomever that is in. Nets. Okay, those of you that are just now coming in online, if you have to be patient with Canvas, it's having like an overload problem. If you can't get the notes to load up, if just, oh, somebody sent me a chat bubble. I think that was just, okay, that was Braylon. I can email them to you if they're not coming up, because at least for now, the internet's working. If, and y'all know with the way everything's going up and down, if all of a sudden I vanish, it's because the infrastructure has to have an overhaul and I just have to wait for the internet to come back up and re-present the slides, because that falls off with virtual when we have internet problems. This is our period. This is the shortest of the periods of the Cenozoic, from about 2.6 million years ago, and it's still going on. It only has two epochs. Okay, the larger of the two is what we commonly call the Ice Age. That's the Pleistocene. The Ice Age actually started in the previous one, the one we talked about yesterday, in the Pliocene epoch. About the last 200,000 years of that is when the glaciation was really going crazy. We have talked about the ice ages in depth before. I want to say it was the third 6 weeks? I think it was the third 6 weeks we did that. That there's 4 major advances and retreats. The strongest, or the furthest south, was the last one. We called that the Wisconsin maximum. That's the one that shaped our Great Lakes. We talked about that yesterday just a little bit. Continents are pretty much where they are now. Obviously, they're still moving, or we wouldn't have earthquakes and volcanic activity and tsunamis and stuff like that. But the only thing that's really changing at this point now is how much water's in the ocean and how much is locked in ice. So your coast is fluctuating as we have glaciations, which is going to have more coastline because you got it locked in ice, or an interglaciation, which now we call global warming, but the technical term is an interglaciation, which means that the water is now melted and then you have less shoreline because the sea level has gone up. So the phrase that the politicians want to scare everybody with and like try to pad their pockets with, they call it global warming, but this is really what it's called. And you have cycles. They're gonna come back every so often. And it always seems like the first glaciation in the pattern of them is going to be the longest as far as a time period. I don't know if I go too fast. I'm not trying to. So it's very cyclical, about every 100,000 years. This is directly tied into the way that the Earth is going around the sun. It has to do with where the pole is. We talked about obliquity and tilt before. There's repetitive patterns. And then the orbit that we go, right now it's almost perfectly circular, but sometimes it's more stretched. And depending on how far away we are from the sun is going to determine how much radiation we receive from the sun. I'm not going to go over all of the different time periods because we've done that already. From the research that I did over spring break, officially as of last year, we are in an interglaciation. And yes, so the phrase that they always use is global warming. Now they've sort of changed it to climate change, and that way
because the Earth isn't warming as fast as they thought it would. It's
right. And the thing that drives me nuts is back in the 90s, when I was y'all's age, the original research that the government went to scientists and said, we want you to prove that this planet is heating up. Well, their information didn't do what they were told to find out. And so they based their global warming data off of Venus, not Earth. So, I mean, you guys weren't around then, but I remember the whole, just everything that was going on, and that the scientists were caught fudging the numbers to be able to match which is not what you're supposed to do when you do scientific research. You don't change the information to match what you want. You either prove or disprove your hypothesis, and that's not what happened. Now, I'm not saying that people aren't affecting the temperature of this planet. We are. We give off a whole poop ton of carbon dioxide gas, not necessarily from breathing, okay, but from all of our production and yes, and cars and burning things and all of that, but just in general, our production. And we produce a whole bunch of stuff. With the Wisconsin, I don't know if I put one more on here. I did not. Okay, so with the Wisconsin maximum, about the northern 25-30% of the hemisphere was completely covered in ice. And I'm talking like Game of Thrones ice wall 2 miles high coming straight at you kind of ice, not just snow. You had, let's see, 13,000 feet. Let me tell you how much that is in miles. So 13,000 divided by 5,280 is 2.5 miles high. Okay, so that's how thick the glacier was at its thickest. The ocean, the sea level dropped over 400 feet. Okay, so you would have had more coastline that would have now been land. So you would have had problems with sea life. If it was stuck like reefs, it would have died out. Not the entire planet was frozen. It's not that. It's not like the one that happened 2.5 billion years ago, or even the one that happened that caused the Cambrian explosion. That's still the snowball Earth still had slushy parts. It wasn't like it was a giant ice ball. Let's see here. Do I have one more on here? Yes, I do. When we have a melting or a warming or an interglaciation, whichever word helps you the most there, the cap that's affected the most is going to be your northern ice, primarily because there's no land underneath it. The Antarctica, like you're going to have calving, like we just had a huge, fairly recently, a huge section of the southern ice cap cleave off. We call it calving. And they thought they had a research vessel that was like in the right place at the right time, and it went into the now open area, and they didn't expect like any life at all because it was underneath all this ice. There's no photosynthesis, and they found stuff everywhere. All different kinds of things that were sessile that should not have been there, but they were. So that's one of my fears is bacteria that would be trapped in Antarctica that we have not been exposed to as human beings for a very, very, very long time, and then coming out sort of like a new plague kind of thing, something that we don't have protection against. I'm not trying to like freak everybody out and give you nightmares or anything like that, but we take ice cores from deep underneath our feet, not like right here, but in Antarctica, and I'm curious as to what might be embedded in the ice, because bacteria can survive all different kinds of hostile environments. So northern ice caps are going to melt at a faster rate than the southern one. And then once it starts cooling off, Antarctica just gets larger and larger and larger with every glaciation that occurs after that. Antarctica's, the ice in the South Pole is over 33 million years older than the ice at the North Pole. And we may come to a point where we have a thermal maximum again, where all of it melts and there's no ice on this planet again. And then Azel will be under 200 feet of water. At the Pleistocene is the first one from 2.6 million years ago. Like I said, the Ice Age had already started, already been going on for around 200,000 years to about 12,000 years ago. Okay, now there's two different areas where the glaciations pulled back. In Europe and Asia, it actually pulled back a little bit earlier, by about 2,000 years earlier than it did in North America. So the last pullback, or the beginning of the warming, started about 14,500 years ago, but the epoch didn't change until 12,000 years ago. And the one that we're in now is the Holocene. That's the age of man. Oh, my phone's blowing up. I'm sure it's my coworkers going, what is with this stupid thing? me make sure nobody on here. I don't always hear when they post a comment. I got Mauricio. Yeah, like I said, those of you that are online, we're having all different kinds of Canvas problems right now. Mine is technically working right now, but it's just going to be one of those days. We have, like I said, we've termed the Pleistocene the Ice Age, even though there were 4 glaciations. It wasn't just one. We've had another minor advance not too terribly long ago. We call that one the Little Ice Age, but that one only lasted for a few hundred years. And it was recent. We just came out of it about 1850. But there's 4 specific glaciations. They went as far south as New York. They went as far south as Chicago. This is that 2.5 mile high glacier that I'm talking about. What? Yeah, I don't know if this one's open. I know the women's is open. I don't know if the men's is though. You may have to go to A-Hall. In higher elevations, they actually went as far south as Kansas, as far as that latitude is concerned. Not the 2 mile high wall of ice. That stopped about little south of where the Great Lakes are. And somehow our ancestors survived. The Neanderthals made it into part of this, but they didn't make it out because they were built for cold, not for hot. Hence the much wider nose, the big barrel chest. They're not like chimpanzee hairy kind of thing, but in general have more body hair than our ancestors that made it through. Ours could deal with the warming up. Neanderthals could not. Like I said, we'll get into that when I do human evolution. And right now, I don't think there's any way I can do it in one day. I think I can go from like the Australopithecus, like Lucy and Artie, to like Mesopotamia, like the natural step that we have, the different types of hominids and hominoids, that like the order. But I don't think I can do how we got out of Africa with it in a 45-minute period. I don't think it's humanly possible, no pun intended. We're going to do the Ice Age beasts of North and some in South America because they moved back and forth with that land bridge tomorrow. But in our country, in North America, we had herds of horses still. They eventually left. They went across the northern land bridge into Europe and Asia. We had camels. The camels weren't quite the height of this room, but they were quite a bit larger than current camels. Those are called yesterday camels. We'll talk about them tomorrow. Mastodons and mammoths are not the same thing. The mammoths are the double coat, cold weather, big curved tusks, just like the Ice Age movies. Mastodons were the regular size of an elephant, had very little hair. They lived in forests. We had so many different things, but I don't want to go too far into it because that's what we're talking about tomorrow. When in interglaciation, so between the advances of the ice, you still had summer and winter, but they were much more mild. There wasn't as much as a temperature swing, and it was sort of a freak cold snap that we had a couple months ago. That is so not normal for this area at all. Now, the earliest of our true, like Homo sapiens, what we are, have been around for about 200,000 years. Now, we don't have recorded history until much, much, much later. The oldest thing that we do have it's the cave art, like the handprint. I think that's around 40,000 years ago. But like written language, no, that's recent. And then around 14,000 years ago, so before technically the Holocene, our ancestors, like as far as Native American indigenous peoples, crossed that land bridge, went down between the Laramide and I can't remember the other glacier on the Rockies, and settled into North America and eventually moved to South America. And they all have Chinese descent. Or when I say Chinese, Asian. But primarily Chinese. Let's see here. We had deserts in Africa. Okay, so not everything was an ice block. I said it didn't really go south of around 30 degrees. We have in Africa, the Sahara. I don't know where the Namib is. I know where the Kalahari is. That's also African. I don't know where Namibia is. All I know is it's in Africa. I'd have to pull up a map of the actual continent. We have other ones besides mammoths. The ground sloths came to us from South America. Dire wolves actually were one of the longest lived of the megafauna predators. They lasted longer than any others. They were better adapted. And then we have the saber-tooth. Like I said, saber-tooth is Canadian. They didn't go very far south. The ones that came further south were scimitar-toothed cats, not cats. They're called that, but they're not like the ancestor of your house cat. That's not. Those are also, if I'm not mistaken, African, is where the modern day cat came from. Egyptians revered their cats. They mummified them. So for us, we evolved from Africa, right? And it's specifically Mesopotamia. I do not know if any of your history classes, I don't know if you have anything like that in high school anymore, but it was sort of like all of the right things were in place here. You had two rivers on either side, so they could use that for irrigation. It was the Tigris and the Euphrates. You don't need to know that for right now. If I split this in two, that's where I'll talk about that. So you had a source of water. In fact, human life was attached to rivers. That was our roads. That was how we did trade. That was your life system. You didn't really veer too far away from your river systems. The four of the major animals that we domesticate were located there. Things like the older version of what a cow is, goats, sheep, pigs. They learned how to, they invented the plow. They learned how to do irrigation. That's where written language came from. That's where the first governments and city-states came from. It was all in what they call the Fertile Crescent. Now, 100,000 years ago, not million years ago, it's the worst recorded drought in African history. And if it wasn't for this river system, it probably would have been the end of, well, human evolution would have taken a different path. We would not be here right now, sitting in the same room. So don't worry about this one. This is probably going to span 2 days. I just, for the life of me, cannot figure out how to do this, all of it, in one period. And I just started pulling my information to build it from a couple different college universities, actually. I get most of my stuff. All right, so the Pleistocene starts to retreat. There's a series of events that happen that cause the extinction of the megafauna. Megafauna means the large animals. That's all that translates into. And the Neanderthals also, they went extinct. I know that when I was learning this forever ago, they thought that possibly that the Neanderthals, that they were like bred out, if you will. But when we do talk about this particular species next week, they were adapted for the cold. The reason why those mammoths and the sloths and the bears and everything got so big is because a larger body actually has less loss of their body heat to the environment. It's an adaptation against the cold. And so, and same thing with the Neanderthals, the way that their bodies were, everything from their nose to the size of their chest, everything about them was meant for the cold. So when the planet started warming back up, it couldn't cool off. They essentially had heat stroke. Africa is the only continent that has native megafauna left on it. So giraffes, elephants, all of your hippos, rhinos, they're not naturally found anywhere else. I know there's a few elephants in like Asia and stuff like that, but Africa itself, because of its position, was the least affected by an ice age. So that's where these huge animals that went extinct just about everywhere else, their evolutionary children, their descendants, still hung out in Africa. The only real thing that we have left from that age in this country is the moose but it's nowhere near as big as the stag moose, like nowhere near as big. And there's a few bears, not nowhere near as big as the cave bear or the short-faced bear. And then the bison or the buffalo, whatever we're supposed to call it. They're really the only ones that we have. And they're not as large as the ones that happened during the Ice Age. Like I said, the dire wolf in our country, this predator lasted the longest. Most of them were wiped out somewhere between 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. The dire wolf stuck around. And it wasn't like I said, regular timber wolves are about yay big at the shoulder. And then the dire wolf was a few feet taller at the shoulder. Gosh darn it, chemistry people. What do you want from me?
It's finally cold in here.
Cold?
Yeah.
Well, don't jinx it.
Not even cold. It's so much different.
My phone is acting psycho. Now, our epic, the Holocene, the shortest of all geological epics, period. They are actually talking about whoever's in charge of naming all these things, talking about a new epic just because of our technology. I have no idea where that is in the making. I don't know if that's just something that was being floated around or if they're actually working on doing that. This epic is where all recorded human history falls. Okay, modern man had been around now for well over 100,000 years, but it's the recorded history. Yeah, there's some cave art that's a lot older, particularly from Australia. But as far as written language, like recorded language, that didn't start for a long time. And it started in Africa. It was, what's it called? Sanskrit, I think is what it's called. They would take a clay tablet and they had this like a punch, I guess, and they like different shapes, almost like Braille, but indents in the clay tablet.
Oh, what's that movie called? Not a museum.
You know, I have seen that, but it's been so long. It has like Nicolas Cage or something, doesn't it?
They got the gold tablet.
Okay, well, they didn't. The original ones weren't gold; they were just clay tablets. And then, you fast forward a little bit to the Egyptians, and they had their papyrus, and then they made the reeds, and they pressed them down into paper, and that was the first like that. Like I said, I don't know how much of that I'm going to be able to get into. I like that kind of stuff a lot. That kind of ancient history, specifically the Egyptians, because man, they did so much stuff so long ago. They still don't know how they built those pyramids. It's aliens, right? It's a docking station for a mothership. I know my seventh period is going to say something like that. By about 8,000 years before Christ, so about 10,000 years ago, we had, you may have to try a-hole. This is where we started learning how to selectively breed plants, okay, to cultivate plants. Up until this point, plants were raw. Okay, they were natural. They were just its own evolutionary path. And then we started realizing that we could pick and choose plants that had like maybe a certain section of plants, it would bear its fruit or its seeds a little bit earlier than others. Well, they would choose those so that they would be able to harvest earlier. We did it to everything. We human beings have drastically changed the animal and the plant life on this planet in a rather short period of time. And so you would take the cow, for example. Some cows are bred for meat, and they get big and, no pun intended, beefy. They're big, muscular machines, and they put on their muscle quickly. And then other cows. Yeah, I know, but then you have your dairy cattle, like the Jerseys, and they're bred for milk. And if you've ever seen a Jersey, they look anorexic. You can see their ribs. You can see like the tendons and the bones in the back. You're like, man, you need to feed that cow. They are feeding that cow. All that cow's energy is going into producing milk. It's not going into producing meat. So we have had a drastic effect for our benefit. Once again, that's that large frontal lobe that we have, the problem solving part of our brain, which y'all are still developing right now. And a woman's brain actually develops faster than a man's, but the dendrites on the front part of your brain, I'm not being sexist or anything, it just does. This part is quicker with women than men by about 2 to 3 years. But Mesopotamia is commonly called the cradle of life. It's also called the Fertile Crescent because it was perfect. We had this huge drought that was going on, but that particular area thrived, and that's where all of these things stemmed from. It's just they were very lucky that specific domesticatable, that's not a word, animals that can be domesticated were present here and could be used to help them with cultivation. Because when they first started out, it was just take a stick, jab a hole, put some seeds in it, cover it up with your foot, and move on. Well, eventually they figured out that the oxen, whatever cow was available back then, could pull a plow, not like the modern plow, but it would help them. And they could go deeper in the earth where there's more nutrients, and it was more that could be actually cultivated at a time. So all different kinds of interesting things were going on with these people. So selective breeding, like I said, they pick and choose the traits. Maybe it was, I don't know if they had chickens or not, but some chickens are better layers than others. They would breed those specific hens that had larger eggs or anything, everything that they had the ability to change, they did. With grains, they would harvest them by hand. And with some plants, you go to pick off the thing and the seeds just fall out of the husk. So they bred them to be able to hold on to them. So when they were harvested, they didn't just lose what they were trying to, whatever they were trying to reap out of the ground. So it's all different kinds. I gotta talk about some city-states. And I'm talking about the Ice Age too, the Little Ice Age. And then the population boom. I'm gonna double check and make sure nobody else came online because I am missing some people here. Nope. Back to the right slide. Hopefully Canvas isn't as overloaded. We have no idea what happened. Love being tied to technology when it fails. It's, I don't know, but there's only so much we can do, right? You gotta learn how to roll with the punches. Writing in the first true cities, the city-states, if you will, or at least 3,000 years ago, also happened all in the same area. You've got, and Egypt was just after this. They actually were coinciding essentially side by side. There's some really bad people back in this time. You had, okay, so we still had some of our megafauna trying to hold on. The warming eventually took most of those out. To my knowledge, there was one population of pygmy mammoths. It was on an island, and they made it to about 4,500 years ago. That was the last of them, to my knowledge. I'm gonna have to go and double check as years go on. We might find new fossils, and that might change. All of this can be subject to change as our technology gets better. Up in Canada, there are multiple bolide impacts, like asteroid or comet impacts, but there's no, and I checked, there's no major flood basalts going on right at that time. Now, we have had some other ones that have happened, but it's not like this is the definitive one that caused the extinction, like the one that took out the dinosaurs, or like the Siberian traps with the Permian extinction. Like, yes, it happened, and there is a theory that there was a large comet that blew up above ground that was part of wiping out some of your larger organisms that were up in Canada. They're still doing research on that. That's something that has changed since I was your age. I never learned any of that. But like I said, our technology is getting better. We're understanding more about what's going on. The Little Ice Age is the most recent one, up until about 1850. Now, we've sort of mentioned this before. There was the, in Iceland, Loki, like Ben Franklin was alive when this happened, and he has recorded stuff about how horrible all the conditions were in the 1700s when that thing blew up. And we've already talked about this volcanic explosion. It was in that documentary that we watched as well. And I still haven't found anything that I like that we can watch. It's none of them are, I'll have to do some more digging. But we had some multiple cold periods that happened. This is the 1771 is the one that Loki triggered. I don't know about the other two. I didn't have enough time to go back and double check it. I'm just going to talk about population boom. And then evil bad humans. Evil bad human is going to be coming in periodically as we start getting more into current times. Time's right. It's a good thing. Almost through. Two more bullets. All right, so we have had a gigantic explosion of human life. So 100 AD, so first century, about 107 million people. I don't know how they calculated that number, honestly, but about 170 million people. And that's almost, let's see, to go from million to billion is an increase by 1,000. Is that correct? But you had a huge explosion of population. I don't even know how many people are on the planet now. You look, because the internet never lies. Let's see what it tells me.
8 billion.
8 billion. I thought it was.
That's what I'm guessing.
I think it's more than that. Let's go back. Okay, here we go. So I think there's one more on here. There it is. So how many people are on the planet? And of course, that's changing constantly. No, I can't type, y'all. It says 7.674 billion as of 2019. So we're close. The big thing that has really helped us as far as cutting down sickness, disease, less women are dying with childbirth. That used to be something that happened all the dang time. It's our technology. So starting with the revolution in the 1800s, our life has gotten progressively better and better and better as far as medicine, things like electricity, being able to store food. We're not having to just salt and smoke stuff. We've got refrigeration. We have sewer systems. There was a point in time where people just go in their chamber pot and then empty it out the window onto the street, which is disgusting, but that's what they used to do. Before the first sewage systems were actually, the septic tanks were invented by the French. That's where that kind of stuff came from. Yes, Rome had some sewer systems. The first like modern plumbing is Roman, and that's actually why the important wealthy people went insane, like Nero and Caligula, because they used lead pipes. So they got lead poisoning, which makes you go crazy. But in general, we've learned that that's bad. This is why we don't have survival of the species anymore as human beings. We don't. I don't know how to say it and not sound bad, like mean. There used to be a time, let's just say if a child was born with severe defects, they literally would go and put it out in the woods. We don't do that obviously anymore. That's inhumane. We don't, that natural selection process for human beings does not happen like it does for the rest of the world as far as life is concerned. And like I said, we have altered both plants and animals drastically on purpose. So here's the evil, bad human part. We are not conserving things properly. As a population, I'm not necessarily saying the United States. The United States actually, the conservation and the the pollution controls that we have, the United States is actually pretty responsible as far as that's concerned. And yes, there are other countries that are too. I'm not saying that everybody else is horrible, but some countries just don't. But if things are on their current track and they don't change, within the next 100 years, we're going to see a lot of animals and plants gone. And like I've already mentioned, we're having a major bee crisis. Where we just destroy everything to make room for us. It's what happens, whether it be forests, jungles. That's just the nature of a human being. But like I said, we're trying to stem that. They have all different kinds of programs where we're trying to replant things. We're trying to help the coral reefs come back. There was a serious problem with corals dying off. Trying not to overfish, overhunt. So we're trying. The question is it too late? So we'll eventually get back to evil, bad humans. Can I freeze that? Let me go into who's missing stuff. Stuff.